So, good morning, dear students. Today we have anatomy lecture and we will talk about principles of the blood supply and innervation of the head, neck, and upper limb, and also organs and walls of the chest. So it's big topic, and look, so this topic that's like a conclusion. So this material collect information about blood supply and nerve supply, which is studied before. So maybe I will not say something new for you, but I will try to help you in the organization of the information that you keep in your mind. So let's start. And we'll begin from the blood supply. Why from the blood supply? Because you studied it a long time ago, so it was previous semester. So probably you forgot a lot of material from this topic. In a difference with the nerves which you studied this semester, so you remember almost everything. So, about blood supplies. So, what are the general principles which is blood supplies are based? So, firstly, blood supply of organ, each organ is based on this organ development. Second important moment, that is topographic location of the arteries. And organ. So look, so I have like interesting analogy, so maybe it will help you to understand what does it mean. So arteries like rivers, so they supply blood to all organs within one basin, and at the borders of the arterial basins we observe arterial anastomosis. So you will see it on example of different parts of our body. So let's go to the blood supply. We'll start from the arterial blood supply, from the arteries, and let's go to the head. Firstly, I told you that blood supply of each organ is based on the development of this organ. So what do I mean? So maybe you know that our arteries, major arteries, are developed from the aortic arches. So they are fetal blood vessels. So in reality, our fetus around the 5th week of the embryonic development has 6 pairs of the aortic arches. So 6 pairs of the aortic arches. They are shown here on the picture. Each aortic arch, it looks like a short loop connecting together two aorta. Yeah, so it's not a mistake. In reality, our embryo has two aorta. That is dorsal aorta, this one. So after embryonic development, dorsal aorta becomes our adult aorta. And that is ventral aorta. Ventral aorta becomes a heart. So these 6 pairs of the aortic arches connect dorsal and ventral aorta to each other. So each arch is embedded into corresponding brachial arch. And what do we see here? So first aortic arch, it becomes maxillary artery. So now you know this artery like a branch of external carotid. After that, second aortic arch becomes small stapedial artery. So this stapedial artery supplies steps of middle ear. After that, third aortic arch becomes common carotid artery and proximal segment of the internal carotid artery. After the fourth aortic arch, so it becomes right, so at the left side it becomes subclavian artery, proximal segment of subclavian artery. And sixth aortic arch, it becomes pulmonary artery, and also part of the arterial duct, which you know like arterial ligament in adults because it obliterates after the birth. So these 6 pairs of aortic arches. So that is the same picture, but at the previous picture So our aortic arches were turned in. Now they're turned out. So maybe it is easy for understanding. So what do we see here? So that is first, first aortic arch. So first aortic arch it becomes maxillary artery, which is branch of external carotid artery. After the third one, you see it here, that's internal carotid artery. So fourth one becomes at the left side it becomes arch of aorta, at the right side it becomes brachiocephalic trunk and initial proximal segment of the right subclavian artery. So fifth one, some part of fifth artery it participates in the formation of subclavian artery, but almost all obliterates. And sixth one it becomes pulmonary artery. So you see development of these arteries. So now let's go to the head. And what do we see here? So as a whole, organs of our head are supplied by the three big arteries. And like I told you at the beginning of the lecture, each of these arteries it looks like a river. So which has like a basin. It's a region where this artery supplies everything. And at the borders of these basins, these arteries anastomose with each other. So what are the major arteries of the head? So look here, first one it is violet in color. That is internal carotid artery. So internal carotid artery supplies part of the head, approximately that's eye, forehead, so approximately up to level of the ear. After that, red in color, that is external carotid artery. External carotid artery supplies front of the head and neck, so below the eye, and up to lower part of the neck. And back of the head and neck, it is almost totally supplied by the subclavian artery and its branches. So, at the borders of these arterial basins, arteries make anastomosis. So, what are these anastomoses? Look here, between the internal carotid artery and external carotid artery. So, basins of these two arteries border at the level of nasal cavity. So of course, as a result of this, in the nasal cavity you have a lot of arterial anastomosis between the internal and external carotid arteries. After that, around level of the ear, so basin of the internal carotid artery borders with the basin of the subclavian artery. And in this place, so we have like anastomosis between these two arteries. At the neck region, no, it's difficult to show here on this picture because the picture is flat. So in reality, of course, all of our organs and parts of body have some volume. So, talking about borders of the basins between the external and subclavian arteries at the neck region, it is necessary to remember that subclavian artery supplies deep structures of the neck, in a difference with external carotid artery, which supplies superficial structures of the neck. And only one place where the basins of these two arteries meet each other, it's a level of the thyroid gland, where branches of the external and subclavian arteries anastomose with each other. And there are two organs in the head where all of these three basins meet together. So, and as a result of this, only two organs of our head receive tributaries, receive some branches from the three big arteries. So it's a dura mater of our brain and that is middle ear. So these two organs receive branches from all of these three arteries. So let's continue. We will talk about the places where these arteries anastomose with each other. No, it is more interesting, like in a difference with the simple organs which receive blood from only one artery. So firstly I told you about the nasal cavity. So nasal cavity, that's like a border between the basin of the external and internal carotid artery. So it receives next branches. Look here, upper part of nasal cavity, it gets blood from the anterior ethmoidal artery and posterior ethmoidal artery. Both of ethmoidal arteries are branches of the ophthalmic artery, which is branch of internal carotid. After that, back and lower part of nasal cavity receives blood from the next artery. Firstly, that is a sphenopalatine artery. Sphenopalatine artery is the branch of the pterygopalatine segment of the maxillary artery. And you remember, maxillary artery is the branch of the external carotid. After that, nasal septum and the lower part of, like a flow of nasal cavity, gets blood from this artery. It is called sphenopalatine. Nasopalatine artery. Usually, nasopalatine artery is the branch of greater palatine artery, or that's possible, it may originate from the sphenopalatine artery. In both cases, greater palatine artery as well as sphenopalatine artery are branches of pterygopalatine segment of maxillary artery from the system of the external carotid artery. And at the level of external nose, so you remember this part of like a cavity of external nose, it is called vestibule of nasal cavity. So to the vestibule of nasal cavity, so blood goes with the help of superior labial artery, that's branch of facial artery. But you remember that a facial, like other arteries, it is a branch of the external carotid artery. So place where the facial artery, branch of facial artery anastomose with the ethmoid arteries, chiefly anterior ethmoid artery and nasopalatine artery, it is called Kisselbach's area or Kisselbach plexus. It's a place where it is situated. So maybe you know, so maybe sometimes it just happened with you, so some like a blood bleeding from the nose. So this blood bleeds from the Kisselbach's area, so Kisselbach plexus of the nasal cavity. So, and one more anastomose between the external and internal carotid arteries. It is also related to the nasal cavity, but it is not shown here on this picture. That is anastomose between the dorsal nasal artery, which is terminal branch of ophthalmic artery from the system of internal carotid, and angular artery, which is terminal branch of the facial artery from system of external carotid. So this anastomose occurs at the medial angle of the eye, but again it's like between the nasal cavity and the eye. So this anastomose isn't given in any textbook, so you know about this anastomose. Let's continue, and we are going to the next place where basins of two arteries meet together. So that is level. So that is anastomose between the internal carotid artery and the subclavian artery. You know this anastomos like a circle of Willis. So, circle of Willis, it is located around at the base of our brain, around the hypothalamus, of our brain. And circle of Willis consists from the next arteries. So, first artery here, that is internal carotid, after that to the front of this artery. So it gives off anterior cerebral artery. Both anterior cerebral arteries are connected to each other by the anterior communicating branch. After that, at the back we have the basilar artery. So what's the basilar artery? Basilar artery, that's result of the union between the vertebral arteries. But you remember that vertebral arteries are branches of subclavian arteries. So basilar artery, this unpaired blood vessel, divides into posterior cerebral arteries, here and here. And posterior cerebral arteries are connected with the internal carotid artery with the help of posterior communicating artery, here and here. So now let's make like a conclusion. How many elements are in the Willis circle? As a whole we have 5 elements here. 5 elements here. And first element, so one element of this Willis circle is unpaired, in a difference with the rest of them. So almost all of the elements are paired in a difference with one. It is anterior communicating artery. It is unpaired. So let's count elements of the Willis circle in order from the front to the back. So first unpaired element, it is anterior communicating branch, like I told you. It is unpaired. After that, it is anterior cerebral artery, second element. Third element, that is internal carotid artery. After that, fourth element, it is the posterior communicating artery. And last one, fifth element, that is posterior cerebral arteries. So also it is paired. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Colleagues, it is really important to remember about the Willis circle because of some reasons. First reason, because Willis circle, it is very important example of the collateral circulation. So because it helps for the brain to get uninterrupted blood flow. Second one, because Willis circle, it is some of the frequently asked care questions at the anatomy exam. So be sure. So when you will pass anatomy exam, almost all of you will get some question about the Willis circle. Now, and last important moment here about the Willis circle, that is a mistake which students make almost every time, every year and every exam. So students relate middle cerebral artery to the Willis circle. Don't do this. Middle cerebral artery, it's not a part of Willis circle. Well, so Willis circle, that was example of the arterial anastomos. So at the border between the basins of internal and external carotid artery. And we go more. Anastomos which occur between the external carotid artery and subclavian artery is located in the neck. It is located in the neck, And what can we say about this anastomose? It is in the thyroid gland. It is in the thyroid gland. So, firstly, upper part of thyroid gland gets blood from the superior thyroid artery. Superior thyroid artery, that it is the first branch of the external carotid. But in the same time, lower portion of thyroid gland gets blood from the inferior thyroid artery. Inferior thyroid artery, it is a branch of the thyrocervical trunk. Thyrocervical trunk, it is shown here and here. And you remember the thyrocervical trunk, it is a branch of subclavian artery. Sometimes, but it's not permanent artery. Sometimes brachiocephalic trunk gives off small branch directly to the thyroid gland. This artery is called arteria thyroidea. In English it means like a least thyroid artery. But again, please remember this artery is inconstant. Well, and I told you that there are two organs where the three big arterial systems of the head and neck meet together, and we have two organs where two organs which gets blood from the three arteries. What are these organs? So, first of these organs, it is the middle ear. So about the middle ear, it receives blood from the next sources. Firstly, it is internal carotid artery. So it gives off caroticotympanic arteries. They enter tympanic cavity of the middle ear through the caroticotympanic canalicles and supply anterior wall of tympanic cavity and also auditory tube, bony part or bony segment of the auditory tube. After that, a lot of arteries to the middle ear originate from the external carotid artery. So what are these branches? Firstly, that is superior tympanic artery. Superior tympanic artery, it is the branch of middle meningeal artery, but middle meningeal, it is the branch of the maxillary artery, which is branch of external carotid. So, superior tympanic artery, it enters tympanic cavity. So, on the picture, this artery got the number, well, let me see, it got the number 3. So, superior tympanic artery, it enters tympanic cavity through the cleft between the squamous part and petrous part, which is called petrosquamous fissure of temporal bone, and it supplies a roof of tympanic cavity. Also it supplies stapes, and also it supplies tensor tympani muscle. After that, inferior tympanic artery. This artery is the branch of the ascending pharyngeal, which originates from external carotid. Inferior tympanic artery, it enters tympanic cavity through the tympanic canalicule, and it supplies flow of tympanic cavity and also region of promontory. After that, anterior tympanic artery. Anterior tympanic artery is the branch of the maxillary artery, directly from maxillary artery. It enters tympanic cavity. It enters tympanic cavity through the petrotympanic fissure, and it supplies chiefly anterior wall of tympanic cavity and also malleus and incus. After the posterior tympanic artery is the branch of the stylomastoid artery, which is branch of the posterior auricular artery, which originates from the external carotid. So posterior tympanic artery, it enters tympanic cavity through the canalicule of chorda tympani. You remember about this nerve, just because you studied this nerve during this week. So, canalicule of chorda tympani, and it supplies posterior wall of tympanic cavity. It supplies chorda tympani, part of malleus, stapedial muscle. Sometimes stylomastoid artery gives off branches to tympanic cavity. So in addition to the posterior tympanic, it may supply elements of tympanic cavity directly. And last artery from the system of external carotid is called deep auricular artery. Deep auricular artery, it originates from the maxillary artery, and it supplies flow of tympanic cavity and tympanic membrane. So, and one artery, it is not shown here, but it exists. So it is a labyrinthine arteries. Usually there are 2 or 3 number. So labyrinthine arteries. So they are branches of the basilar artery, which is related to the system of the subclavian artery. And labyrinthine arteries, they supply internal ear. But this artery anastomoses with the inferior tympanic artery at the region of promontory, because in the same time promontory is related to the middle ear, like elevation at the medial wall, but also it is a part of the bony labyrinth of the internal ear. So as a whole, so we've got 7 arteries which supply such a small area like middle ear. Again, why this small organ receives such a lot of arteries? Just because it's immediately between the basins of the 3 big arterial systems. And one more organ receives arteries from all of the 3 arteries of head and neck, but in a difference with the middle ear, this organ is extended, it's much bigger. I mean dura mater of the brain. Dura mater of the brain, in reality it receives a lot of branches from different arteries. And what are these major arteries? Firstly, in the anterior cranial fossa. So this artery is the anterior meningeal artery. Anterior meningeal artery becomes from the so it originates from the anterior ethmoid artery. You remember anterior ethmoid artery? It is the branch of the ophthalmic artery, which is branch of internal carotid. So this artery is here. Again, I'm repeating, so it occupies this floor of the anterior cranial fossa. After that, biggest meningeal artery, it is here in the center. Biggest artery. It is the middle meningeal artery. Middle meningeal artery. Middle meningeal artery, it is the branch of the maxillary artery. So in reality, so this artery originates from the maxillary, just beside the temporomandibular joint, and this artery goes to the spinous foramen at the base of skull. But just before it enters spinous foramen, artery gives off accessory branch. Accessory branch goes to the oval foramen. So what is inside of oval foramen? Just last week you studied that mandibular nerve goes through the oval foramen. So accessory branch of middle meningeal artery goes to the oval foramen, enters cranial cavity through this foramen, and it goes to supply trigeminal ganglion. So it happens out of skull. After that, middle meningeal artery, it goes into the skull, into cranial cavity through the spinous foramen. And just after the spinous foramen, it divides into two big branches. So it is the frontal branch. It goes to supply like a vault of anterior cranial fossa and vault of just middle cranial fossa. And it is the parietal branch. It supplies like inner side of the parietal bone. So what happens here? Frontal branch. Frontal branch gives off orbital branch. Frontal branch of middle meningeal artery gives off orbital branch. It goes to the superior orbital fissure, and inside of the superior orbital fissure it anastomoses with a lacrimal artery. Lacrimal artery, so please remember, it is the branch of ophthalmic. So it's a branch of ophthalmic. So it is related to system of internal carotid artery. So what happens here? We have got one more anastomose between the external and the internal carotid artery. About the parietal branch of middle meningeal artery, parietal branch, it goes to the back, I told you, it supplies like inner side of the parietal bone. Now, and also it gives off superior tympanic artery. But I told you about superior tympanic artery before when I explained you blood supply of the middle ear. So next, a third artery which supplies meninges of the brain, chiefly it's a dura mater. So third artery, it's a posterior meningeal artery. Posterior meningeal artery, it is shown here. It's a small artery, really it is a small artery in reality. So posterior meningeal artery, it's one of the terminal branches of the ascending pharyngeal artery, and it supplies region of the jugular foramen. In addition, I told you posterior meningeal is a branch of ascending pharyngeal, so also it is related to system of the external carotid artery. In addition to these two arteries, which started from the external carotid, so I mean middle and posterior meningeal, also dura mater receives blood from the next branches of the external carotid. It's a mastoid artery branch of occipital, And terminal branches of stylomastoid artery. It's a branch of posterior auricular. And floor of posterior cranial fossa, it's the last one. It is supplied by the meningeal branches of the basilar artery, as well as meningeal branches of the vertebral arteries. Both basilar and vertebral arteries are related to the system of subclavian artery. So let's make like a conclusion and let's repeat arteries which supply dura mater. First one here, flow of anterior cranial fossa. It is anterior meningeal artery from ophthalmic, from internal carotid. After that, middle meningeal artery. It is from maxillary from the external carotid. After that, here, it's a posterior meningeal artery from ascending pharyngeal from external carotid. After that, stylomastoid artery, meningeal branches of stylomastoid. It is from posterior auricular from external carotid. After that, meningeal branches from mastoid arteries from the occipital. It's part of, it's like a branch of external carotid. And last, at the posterior cranial fossa, we have meningeal branches of the vertebral arteries as well as from the basilar artery. So that was blood supply of dura mater. So we are finishing to talk about arterial blood supply of head and neck. So again, I'm repeating you, we have three big arterial systems. Each system has own arterial basin and it supplies all of the organs inside of this basin. At the borders of the basins, different arteries anastomose to each other. Well, we are continuing. And next important thing, so we will talk about blood supply of the upper limb. Firstly, what can we say about this arterial blood supply as a whole? So, upper limbs are supplied by the subclavian arteries and its continuations, like axillary as well. So, do we have arterial anastomosis in the upper limb? Of course we have. And these anastomoses are situated around the big joints of the upper limb. In reality, next lecture, you will see the same in the lower limb. But now we're talking about upper one. So, there are three big arterial anastomoses, systems of anastomosis around the big joints of the upper limb. They are shoulder arterial network, it is an elbow arterial network, and it's an arterial network of the hand. So let's begin from the first one. First one, it is the shoulder arterial network. This arterial network is formed by the two arteries. It is subclavian artery, first artery of upper limb, in the upper part of picture, and it's a brachial artery. So, what is the most important anastomose here? So most important anastomose here occurs between the two arteries. It is the anastomose between the supramandibular artery, suprascapular artery, of course, suprascapular artery, and circumflex scapular artery. So what are these two arteries? So firstly, subclavian artery. It gives off brachiocephalic trunk, this short artery. From brachiocephalic trunk, it gives off this one, suprascapular artery. Suprascapular artery, suprascapular artery, it comes from the thyrocervical trunk and goes to the back, passes through the scapular notch. After that, it goes down to the infratemporal fossa, where it meets next artery. This artery is shown here. No, it looks like a loop. We don't see part of this artery behind the scapula. It is a circumflex scapular artery. Circumflex scapular artery. It is the branch of the subscapular artery, which becomes from the axillary. So, anastomose between the subclavian and axillary artery. Now, and also we have some anastomoses around the surgical neck of the humerus. So, what are these anastomoses? Firstly, it is the two circumflex humeral arteries, anterior and posterior one. Posterior circumflex, so both of these arteries, both of them, so they form like a arterial circle around the surgical neck, and this circle of arteries anastomose with next blood vessels. So first of these blood vessels, so it's acromial branch of thoracoacromial artery, and in the lower part, so it is the ascending branch of the deep brachial artery, which comes from the brachial, as you understand. So as a whole, so what are the anastomoses in the shoulder region? First anastomose, it is also called scapular anastomose. It is the anastomose between the suprascapular artery and circumflex scapular artery. So anastomose between the subclavian artery and axillary artery. Second anastomose, it is called humeral, and it is formed by the anterior and posterior circumflex humeral arteries, after that acromial branch of thoracoacromial artery, and ascending branch of the deep brachial artery. It's anastomose between the axillary and brachial arteries. Well, we found some anastomoses in the shoulder region. Let's go down and we'll talk about the arterial network of the elbow joint. Arterial network of the elbow joint contains 8 arteries. So what are these arteries? Firstly, just above the elbow joint, you see brachial artery. Brachial artery gives off 2 ulnar collateral arteries. It is the superior ulnar collateral artery and inferior ulnar collateral artery. After that, we need to come back to the deep brachial artery. In this picture, it is given Latin name, profunda brachii, but you know, it is a deep brachial artery. So, deep brachial artery gives off 2 terminal branches. They are called radial collateral artery and middle collateral artery. Radial and middle collateral. Radial collateral is this one is a middle collateral. After that, next one, So we found first 4 arteries. After that, from the distal side, radial artery, it is this one. Radial artery gives off radial recurrent artery, and radial recurrent artery anastomoses with the radial collateral artery, which comes from the profunda brachii artery. So it is with the radial artery. What happens with ulnar artery? Situation with ulnar artery is more complicated, but it is interesting. Firstly, ulnar artery gives off recurrent ulnar artery, which divides into 2 branches, anterior and posterior ulnar recurrent arteries. So in this picture it is shown like both arteries originate differently, but usually they originate like a common trunk. So anterior ulnar recurrent artery anastomoses with the inferior ulnar collateral, and posterior ulnar recurrent artery anastomoses with the superior ulnar collateral artery. And last, we need to find last recurrent artery. So you see how ulnar artery gives off common interosseous artery. Common interosseous artery divides into anterior and posterior interosseous arteries. But posterior interosseous artery gives off recurrent interosseous artery, and recurrent interosseous artery anastomoses with the middle collateral, which comes from the deep brachial artery. So as a whole we found 8 arteries. So 4 of them are collateral and 4 of them are recurrent. No, and at least we found 4 anastomoses here. Next place where we have a lot of arterial anastomoses, it's a hand. So these anastomoses are formed by the 2 big arteries. So these are radial and ulnar arteries. About the radial artery, so you see like a right hand from dorsal side. So what are the radial artery? Radial artery is here. So radial artery, it gives off superficial palmar branch. No, and after it turns around the carpals, it continues with the deep palmar arch. So ulnar artery, it gives off deep palmar arch. After that it becomes superficial palmar arch. So as a whole, both palmar arches are formed by the both arteries. Superficial palmar arch, it's a continuation of the ulnar artery, but it anastomoses with the superficial palmar branch from radial. Deep palmar arch, it's a continuation of the radial artery, but in the same time it anastomoses with the deep palmar branch from the ulnar artery. So again, a lot of anastomosis. In reality, in addition to the palmar arches, so we have carpal arches, but they are not shown on this picture because they are not so important, like palmar one. So in the case of dorsal carpal arch, it is formed by the carpal branches of radial ulnar artery and posterior interosseous artery. And palmar carpal arch is formed by the carpal branches of radial and ulnar and anterior interosseous artery. And we are going to the chest. So in the case of chest, it is important to talk differently about the chest wall, about the content of the chest, and some organs have special blood supply. We'll talk about it. So about the chest wall, you see it here. Chest wall is supplied by the intercostal arteries. You see posterior intercostal arteries. Posterior intercostal arteries originate directly from the aorta, thoracic aorta. And anterior intercostal arteries. So anterior intercostal arteries. They have different sources. So, firstly, in the first and second intercostal spaces, everything is different. So, posterior part of upper two intercostal spaces receive blood from the supreme intercostal artery. Supreme intercostal artery, it is the branch of costocervical trunk from the subclavian artery. Anterior side of upper two intercostal spaces receive blood from the superior thoracic artery, which is branch of the axillary. After that, intercostal spaces from the third one and up to 6 or 7 intercostal space. They receive two intercostal arteries, posterior from aorta and anterior intercostal artery, which originates from the internal thoracic artery here, which is branch of the subclavian. And lower intercostal spaces from the 7th or 8th and up to last one. So they receive blood at the back from the posterior intercostal arteries coming from aorta, and at the front from anterior intercostal arteries, but not coming from internal thoracic artery. They originate from the musculophrenic artery. Musculophrenic artery is one of the terminal branches of internal thoracic artery. Well, next organ also it is interesting for us. It is the breast. It has interesting blood supply. From the next sources. Medial side of breast receives blood from the medial mammary arteries. So this medial mammary arteries originates from the perforant branches of the anterior intercostal arteries coming from the internal thoracic. And lateral side of the breast receives blood from the lateral mammary arteries. Lateral mammary arteries originate from the lateral thoracic artery, which is branch of the axillary artery. So you see difference. So when I told you about the wall of chest, it is supplied by thoracic aorta directly and from the different branches of subclavian artery. In the case of the breast, it is different. So two arteries here, it is subclavian, but not aorta, it is axillary. Next organ, which has own blood supply, actually in reality it has own circle of blood, we say cardiac circulation. Of course it's a heart. So heart receives own arteries directly from the bulb of aorta. So these two arteries are left coronary artery and right coronary artery. Left coronary artery, it originates from the left side of the aortic bulb. After that it gives off next important branches such as anterior interventricular artery. After that, left circular artery, and rarely left marginal artery. Right coronary artery, it gives off right marginal branch or right marginal artery. Posterior interventricular, here it is given like posterior descending, but it's the same. So what is important and what is different in these two arteries? So, in a different with the great circulation, look, all of the organs of the great circulation receive fresh portion of the blood during the heart's systole, but not coronary arteries. Coronary arteries gets fresh portion of the blood during the diastole of heart. And to complete explanation of the cardiac circulation, we need to talk about the veins. We did not talk about the veins before, but at the heart we'll begin to talk about it. So in reality, a heart has not only own arteries, also it has own veins. What are these veins? We divide all of the cardiac veins into the next groups. So great veins, after that anterior veins, and small cardiac veins. Great veins, they are next. It is great cardiac vein, this one, great cardiac vein. After that it is a small cardiac vein, middle cardiac vein. Actually, about these great veins, great cardiac vein, or in Latin vena cardiaca magna. Actually it repeats, so it goes along the anterior interventricular artery. After that it turns around the base of our heart and it drains into coronary sinus. After that small cardiac vein, it follows right marginal branch of right coronary artery and after that drains in coronary sinus. Middle cardiac vein follows posterior interventricular artery and after that it drains into coronary sinus. And also we have posterior vein of the left ventricle, it follows left marginal artery and drains into coronary sinus. And it is not shown here, but we have oblique vein of the left atrium. It has no arterial analogy, but it drains into coronary sinus. So major feature of the great veins, as you see, that all of them drain into coronary sinus. And after that, coronary sinus drains into the right atrium. About other veins, anterior cardiac veins, they collect blood from anterior side, collect blood from the anterior side of the right ventricle and right atrium. These numerous anterior veins drain directly into right atrium and rarely into the right ventricle. And about the small cardiac veins, they are called vena cordis minimorum, so they are smallest. So these small numerous veins collect blood chiefly from the endocardium. That's all about the cardiac circulation. So you see, cardiac circulation, it is different. It is different with a great circulation. And so we begin to talk about the veins. So we finished question about arterial blood supply of the head, neck, upper limb and chest. So now let's talk about the veins. So let's talk about the veins and venous drainage from the same parts. What I mean? I mean venous drainage from the head, neck, upper limb and chest. So about the venous drainage again. So what are the general principles to understand this venous drainage? First one, like arterial blood supply, it is based on the organ development. After that, veins are often associated with arteries. So I said a little about the veins of the heart, and you saw that great cardiac veins follow arteries. In reality, so arteries, it's often they repeat course of the arteries. But in a difference with the arteries, veins are extensively or widely anastomosed. So remember please, when I told you about arterial anastomosis, so where do we have this arterial anastomosis? We have this anastomosis, so at the borders between the arterial basins. At the borders of arterial basins, between the external carotid and the internal carotid, between the subclavian and axillary, between the radial and ulnar arteries, between the thoracic aorta and subclavian. But in the case of veins, it is different. So really they have a lot of anastomosis. Let's start, and we will begin from the head. So we will begin from the head. So structures which collect almost all of the blood from the head, so they are called sinuses of dura mater. Sinuses of dura mater. We divide these sinuses into sinuses of the roof of skull and sinuses of the base of skull. What do you see here? Here you see the sinuses of the roof of skull. and the sinuses are the next. So that is superior sagittal sinus. So it goes from the foramen cecum level through the base of the falx cerebri up to level of the internal occipital protuberance, where it drains into confluence of the sinuses. Confluence, it means like a stalk. So it's like a stalk of sinuses. So what is the direction of the blood flow in this sinus? Actually, it's not only in this sinus. In all of the sinuses of the dura mater, blood flows from the front to the back. So superior sagittal sinus, not exception. Blood flows from the front to the back in a direction of the sinus's stalk. After that, inferior sagittal sinus, it repeats shape of the superior sagittal, but it is much smaller, and it goes through the free edge of the falx cerebri. At the place where the falx cerebri crosses with the tentorium cerebelli, it unites with the great cerebral vein and drains into straight sinus. But straight sinus drains into sinus's stalk. And after that, almost all of the blood from the sinus's stalk drain into the transverse sinus, which continues with the sigmoid sinus, and sigmoid sinus drains into the internal jugular vein. So there was sinuses of the roof of skull. Now sinuses of the base of skull. So again, common direction for the blood flow, it's from the front to the back. So everything begins from the sphenoparietal sinus. You see it here. This one and this one. Each sphenoparietal sinus continues with a cavernous sinus, but you need to remember that both cavernous sinuses are connected together with the help of anterior intercavernous sinus and posterior intercavernous sinus. After that, cavernous sinuses drain into inferior petrosal sinus, which drains into sigmoid, and into superior petrosal sinus, which drains into transverse sinus. So it is the sinuses of the dura mater. But how to fill these sinuses with the blood? I mean, what are the tributaries of the sinuses? So these sinuses receive a lot of tributaries. Firstly, they receive blood from the bones of skull. No, actually, we don't study this vein and what to study here. Usually these veins of the bones have similar names to the bones. Just one feature. For flat bones of the roof of skull, so we need to add name diploic to the common name of vein. So frontal diploic vein, parietal diploic veins, occipital diploic veins, parietal diploic veins. No, you understood. After that, next tributary for the sinuses, labyrinthine veins. Labyrinthine veins collect blood from the internal ear and partly from the middle ear and drain into the sigmoid sinus or inferior petrous. After that, ophthalmic veins, they are shown here, two veins. It's a superior and inferior ophthalmic. They collect blood from the eyes and and rest of arteries, so they are for not arteries, veins. So these are veins of the brain. We will not talk about all of the veins of brains, but I will say something for you. So look. So we divide all of the veins of the brain into superficial and deep veins. At this picture you see superficial veins. So superficial veins, respectively, we have basal superficial veins. No, it's not difficult to understand what they do. So just these veins collect blood from the cortex and drain directly into closest sinus. We have the medial superficial vein, but most interesting thing happens at the dorsolateral side of the brain, because we have no big sinuses at the dorsolateral side of the brain. So what is the solution here? So we have three big veins at the dorsolateral side of brain, which helps with the venous drainage. What are these veins? First one, it is anterior here. It is a middle cerebral vein. It goes from the dorsolateral side through the lateral sulcus to the base of skull, where it drains into cavernous sinus. Second vein, it is above. This vein is called superior anastomotic vein or Trollard's vein. It goes through the central groove and drains into superior sagittal sinus. And last one, it is below and at the back. It is a inferior anastomotic vein or vein of Labbé, and this vein drains into transverse sinus. Next one. So as you understand, blood from all of the sinuses drain into the internal jugular vein. Internal jugular vein, it's the biggest venous collector of the head and neck. So we filled internal jugular vein with the blood from the head, but in addition to it, internal jugular vein gets some extracranial tributaries. So what are the extracranial tributaries of this vein? They are 5 in number and they are not so difficult. Firstly, it receives blood from the veins which correspond to the anterior branches of external carotid arteries. So what are these veins? So it is the facial vein, it is lingual vein, and it is superior thyroid vein. After that, fourth vein, fourth vein has no arterial analogy. It is called retromandibular vein. So this vein appears after union of the superficial temporal vein and numerous pterygoid veins coming from the pterygoid venous plexus. And last tributary here for internal carotid artery, it is the numerous pharyngeal veins collecting blood from the viscera of the neck. After that, internal jugular vein unites with the subclavian vein to form brachiocephalic vein, and both brachiocephalic veins drain into superior vena cava. After that, second venous collector of the neck, it is the vertebral vein. It is the tributary of subclavian vein, but vertebral vein collects blood only from the deep muscles, spine, and cervical segments of the spinal cord. and two more veins of the neck. Two more veins of the neck. They are anterior jugular, you see. It's a small cutaneous vein originating at the region of chin, mental region. After that, these small veins drains into internal jugular, usually to internal jugular. Just one thing is interesting for us. In the lower part of neck, these two veins are connected with the jugular anastomos. And it's an external carotid vein. External carotid vein, it is formed by the union of occipital vein, posterior auricular vein, and anastomos with the temporomandibular vein. Also, it gets blood from the transverse cervical vein, sometimes from the suprascapular vein. And it drains into the, usually it drains into lower or distal segment of internal jugular or directly into the venous angle, place where internal jugular unites with the subclavian vein. In the upper limb, we are going down. All of the blood, so from the upper limb, will be collected with the subclavian vein. After the subclavian, you remember, unites with internal jugular to form brachiocephalic vein, and both brachiocephalic vein drains into superior vena cava. Drains into superior vena cava. But what is interesting? What are the interesting features of the veins in the upper limb? We divide veins of the upper limb into the two groups, deep veins and superficial veins. About deep veins, so what is interesting in the deep veins? Firstly, deep veins follow corresponding artery. So we have brachial artery, so we have brachial veins. Radial artery, so radial veins. Ulnar artery, so ulnar veins. It's the first feature. So they have same topography like arteries, corresponding arteries, of course. After that, but in a difference with the arteries, deep veins are paired. They are paired. So, like I told you, we have one radial artery but two radial veins. So, first unpaired vein, which is in the upper limb, it is the axillary. It's a result of union of two brachial veins. No, usually it is axillary. After that, and also about these deep veins, because they follow arteries, so they have interesting Latin name. They are called vena comitantes. What does it mean? It's like veins satellites. And superficial veins. Superficial veins don't follow arteries. They are unpaired and they are two in number. I mean two big veins. It is the basilic vein, and it is the cephalic vein. About cephalic vein, it originates at the dorsal side of the hand like a continuation of the first dorsal metacarpal vein. After that it goes at the ventral side of the forearm, crosses elbow joint and goes to the lateral bicipital groove. It goes through the lateral bicipital groove. After that it pierces space between the deltoid and pectoral muscles. I mean major pectoral muscle, which is called deltoidopectoral groove, and it drains into axillary vein. Destiny of basilic vein is different, little different. Again, it originates at the dorsal side of the hand like a continuation of the fifth metacarpal dorsal vein. After that, it goes to the front of the forearm. After that, it crosses elbow joint, but it enters medial bicipital groove. But this vein is short, it pierces medial bicipital groove, it drains into some of the brachial veins. And at the level of the elbow joint, these two veins anastomose with each other with the help of the median cubital vein. No, actually, there are a lot of variants of the anastomosis. It can be median cubital vein, it can be intermediate cubital vein, so different variants. Well, next one about the organs of the chest. About organs of the chest, inside of chest we have two interesting venous collectors. What are these collectors? These are azygous vein at the right side and a hemiazygous vein at the left side. About the azygous vein. So this azygous vein, it begins like a continuation of the right ascending lumbar vein. So it goes up, and this vein drains into the superior vena cava. About the hemiazygous vein, it begins like a continuation of the left ascending lumbar vein, and really it ascends a little, but at the level of T7, T8, between these two vertebrae, this hemiazygous vein turns to the right and drains into the azygous. And in addition to hemiazygous vein, in the upper part of the left side of the thoracic cage, we have accessory hemiazygous vein. It collects blood here, but goes down. And at level of T7, T8, it drains or into hemiazygous vein or into the azygous vein. So these veins, I mean azygous, hemiazygous and accessory hemiazygous, these veins collect blood from the wall of thoracic cavity with the help of posterior intercostal veins, and also they collect blood from the internal organs of thoracic cavity, So it was general moments into the general principles of the venous drainage, again, of head, neck, upper limb and chest. And last question, it is the innervation, again, of the head, neck, upper limb and chest. I know, so our lecture is nearly the end, but you study innervation right now. Actually, this semester you study only nervous system. That's why I paid attention chiefly to the blood supply, then to the nerve supply. About the nerve supply, so I will say just a little, just some moments. About the head. So, firstly, sensory innervation of the skin. Actually, sensory innervation of the skin of neck, so it can be subdivided into two parts. So front of the head, approximately it's a level of ear. So front of ear, so it is called cranial part. patocranial area of the skin. It receives nerve supply. It receives nerve supply from the cranial nerves. Behind the auricle, it is the cervical area. So this part of skin receives nerve supply chiefly from the spinal nerves. About the cranial area, skin here in this region receives nerves from the three divisions of trigeminal. Now I will not say names of nerves because you study it just right now. So you remember about first division of trigeminal, second division of trigeminal, and third division of trigeminal. No, and same here, but in some difference with the colors. So it's a first division of trigeminal, second division of trigeminal, third division of trigeminal. Do other cranial nerves participate in the nerve supply of the head's skin? Yes, they do. Other nerves participate. No, actually, not other nerves. One more nerve participates in the nerve supply of head skin. It is the vagus nerve, which gives a little auricular branch supplying the back of auricle. No, unfortunately, this small area is not shown at this picture. Rest of the head's skin is supplied by the spinal nerves. What are these spinal nerves? This one. It's a great occipital nerve or major occipital nerve. Major occipital nerve, it is the posterior branch of the second cervical spinal nerve. After that is small or minor occipital nerve. Minor occipital nerve is the branch of the cervical plexus. After the behind and below the auricle, it is the behind and below the auricle, it is the great auricular nerve. Great auricular, which is branch of the cervical plexus as well. Next one. About the muscles, nerve supply of the head's muscles. So we remember that muscles of the head are divided into two groups: muscles of the facial expression and muscles of the mastication. About facial expression, all of them are supplied by facial nerve. Just you study this nerve this week. So it gives next branches, temporal branches. Temporal, zygomatic, buccal, marginal, mandibular, and cervical. Now, you may try to remember, so what are muscles exactly are supplied by each of these branches, but it is easy to remember with the help of simple rule. Look here, temporal branches supply all of the muscles from the forehead up to eye. Zygomatic branches supply muscles between the eye and nostrils. Buccal branches supply muscles between the nostrils and mouth. After that, marginal mandibular supply muscles between the mouth and chin, and cervical branch supply only one muscle, platysma muscle. In reality, in addition to these muscles, facial nerve supplies some of muscles of the neck. It supplies some of muscles of the neck, such as stylohyoid and posterior belly of the gastric muscle. Well, no, here I told you so. It's so it's a cooperation between the branches of trigeminal and facial nerve. No, it's not important now. About the neck region. Skin hair is supplied again by neck nerves. So skin of neck is supplied by cervical plexus. That is front of necks. Front of the neck skin, and back of neck is supplied by posterior branches of cervical spinal nerves. After that, upper limbs. So again, we'll begin from the skin. So in the shoulder region, upper part of shoulder, I mean just above the clavicle and acromion. This part of skin is supplied by the supraclavicular branches of the cervical plexus. After that, in the arm, skin is supplied by the four nerves. It is the medial cutaneous nerve of the arm, which is a branch of the medial cord of brachial plexus. After that, at the lateral side, it is the superior lateral cutaneous nerve of the arm, so which is branch of axillary nerve from the posterior cord of brachial plexus, and inferior cutaneous nerve of the arm, which is branch of the radial nerve from the posterior cord of brachial plexus. And back of arm is supplied by the posterior cutaneous nerve of the arm from the radial nerve of the posterior cord of brachial plexus. In the forearm, skin is supplied by three nerves, so the lateral cutaneous nerve of the arm, which is branch of musculocutaneous nerve from the lateral cord of the brachial plexus. After that, medial cutaneous nerve of the arm from the medial cord of brachial plexus, and posterior side of skin. It is supplied by the posterior side of skin is supplied by the posterior cutaneous nerve of the arm, which is branch of radial nerve from posterior cord. And skin of hand is supplied by three nerves. It's a radial, ulnar, and median nerve. So at the palmar side of the thumb, index, middle, and side of the ring finger are supplied by the median nerve. After that, 1.5 fingers are supplied by ulnar. 1.5, I mean palmar side of the little finger and half of the ring finger. And at the dorsal side, just chiefly two nerves. So half at the side of thumb, it's a radial, and half from the little finger side, it's a ulnar nerve. No, in just exception, it's a distal phalanges of the thumb, index, and middle, and half of distal phalanx of the ring finger, which receive nerve supply still from the median nerve. You studied this question at the first class in this semester. Just several minutes before end of lecture, so I will not talk about nerve supply of muscles of the upper limb. We'll just say a little about the nerve supply of the skin of thorax, and we'll finish lecture at this place. So, in a difference with the head, neck and upper limb, skin of chest, it is supplied very simply by the intercostal nerves. Actually, in a difference with the other regions of our body, thoracic spinal nerves don't form plexuses. As a result of this, regions of distribution for cranial regions of distributions for intercostal nerves, so they look like a zebra. You see T3, T4, T5, T6, T7. So actually, any plexuses, no plexuses here. Intercostal nerves, they give some branches like anterior cutaneous branch, like lateral cutaneous branch. No, and also intercostal nerves supply parietal pleura, and these nerves are mixed, so they supply intercostal muscles. Back of chest is supplied of the by the posterior branches of thoracic spinal nerves. Actually, at this place we will finish our lecture again. So almost all of the lecture I told you about the blood supply, just because you might forgot blood supply. About the nerves, just you study this nerves right in this semester. So thank you for your attention. So good luck. We are finishing the lecture.